Deep in the forest there was my little corner of dreams. Board by board, nail by nail, I had been building a small cabin all on my own. It wasn't much, just a modest wooden structure with a roof for walls, and a door that creaked when it opened. But to me it was everything. My hideaway from the noise of the world. My secret place of peace. But every time I returned, my heart sank. The cabin would be wrecked. Planks ripped off. Windows smashed. Sometimes even the door was hanging by one hinge. At first I told myself it was the wind. Or maybe wild animals. Or even curious hikers stumbling through. But no. The damage was too deliberate. Too intentional. Someone out there wanted to destroy what I was creating. And I wasn't going to let it go on. That night, as I sat by the broken remains of my little house, an idea struck me. I would catch them. Whoever was doing this, I would find out. The next morning I went into town and bought a small hidden camera. It wasn't expensive, but it was enough. A motion-detecting lens that I could mount in the trees, almost invisible. I set it up facing the cabin, the lens peeking through branches like an unblinking eye. Then I waited. The following day I returned to the forest, heart pounding. I didn't know what to expect. I pulled out the memory card from the camera, took it home, and loaded the footage onto my laptop. And there it was. Not the wind. Not animals. Not random strangers. Teenagers. A group of 3, 2 boys and a girl. They couldn't have been older than 16 or 17. I watched as they approached my cabin, laughing, shoving each other, one of them carrying a stick like it was a baseball bat. They kicked down the door. They ripped off planks. They smashed the roof with rocks. And the whole time they laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. My blood boiled. This wasn't just mischief. This was cruelty. They had no reason, no grudge. They just enjoyed destroying something that wasn't theirs. Something I had built with my own hands. As the video played, I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. My jaw hurt from grinding my teeth. And I made a decision right there. They thought they could ruin my hard work for fun? I was going to teach them a lesson they would never forget. I spent the next few days preparing. The forest was my territory. I knew every path, every clearing, every patch of soft ground. And I knew exactly what I was going to do. First, I picked the spot, just a few steps from the cabin in an open area they always walked through. There I began digging. With a shovel in hand, I carved a wide, deep hole into the earth. It was exhausting, back-breaking work, but every scoop of dirt fueled my anger. Sweat poured down my back, my arms ached, but I didn't stop until the pit was deep enough that once someone fell in, climbing out would be nearly impossible. Next I covered it. Sturdy branches across the hole, then leaves, dirt, and grass until it looked just like the forest floor. Perfect camouflage. But I wasn't finished. I needed bait. So the next day I placed a box of candy bars right near the center. A stupid, childish trick. But that was the point. They were kids. And kids couldn't resist free candy. Finally, I waited. The camera was ready, hidden in a new spot, lens aimed right at the trap. I sat nearby, far enough not to be seen, close enough to hear. My heart was racing, my palms sweating. Would they come back? Would my plan work? Hours passed. The forest was quiet except for the birds. Then voices. Laughter. The crunch of footsteps. They were back. The same 3 teenagers appeared, walking toward the cabin, ready to smash what I had rebuilt the day before. But then they noticed the box of candy bars. "Yo, check this out," one of them shouted. "No way, free food," the girl laughed. They didn't even hesitate. They rushed forward. The boy with the stick grabbed the box, lifted it triumphantly, and in the next second the ground gave way beneath them. Crash. All 3 fell straight into the pit, screaming as they tumbled. Dirt and leaves rained down after them. I stepped out from behind the trees, my heart pounding with satisfaction. I looked down into the hole. There they were, confused, angry, and a little scared. "What the hell?" one of the boys yelled. He tried to climb out, but the dirt walls crumbled under his hands. The girl looked up at me, her face pale. "Let us out. This isn't funny." I just stood there, calm, a cup of coffee in my hand. "Not so fun when someone ruins your day, is it?" I said, my voice steady but cold. They begged. They shouted. They even cursed at me. But I didn't move. I just let them feel what it was like, to be powerless, to realize that actions have consequences. For hours they sat in that pit, yelling and arguing with each other. Finally their bravado broke. They started apologizing, promising, swearing they would never come back, never touch my cabin again. Only then did I help them out. When their feet touched solid ground, they didn't laugh anymore. They didn't look so brave. They looked ashamed. And that was enough. From that day on, my little house in the forest remained untouched. And those kids? Every time I passed them in town, they lowered their heads, avoiding my eyes. It was a small victory, but the sweetest one I had ever tasted. For a few weeks after the incident, life felt peaceful. My little forest cabin finally remained untouched. I could walk into the clearing, unlock the door, and find everything exactly as I left it. No broken planks, no smashed windows, no cruel laughter echoing through the trees. I thought it was over, but I was wrong. One evening, as the sun was setting, I heard heavy footsteps approaching. Not the careless laughter of teenagers this time, but something heavier, slower, angrier. 3 adults stepped into the clearing. I recognized their faces immediately. They looked just like the kids I had trapped. A tall man with a beer belly, a woman with sharp eyes and folded arms, and another man with a hard jawline and clenched fists. They stood in front of my cabin, glaring at me. "You the one who put my son in a hole?" the man with the belly demanded, pointing a finger at me. His face was red, his words slurred like he'd been drinking. I didn't flinch. "Your son? The one who's been destroying my property every week?" "Yeah, that's him." The woman scoffed, stepping forward. "They're just kids. You don't scare children like that. Do you know how traumatized they were?" "Traumatized?" I laughed bitterly. They weren't traumatized when they smashed my cabin to pieces. They weren't traumatized when they laughed at what they destroyed. I gave them a taste of their own medicine. That's all. The man with the jawline took a step closer, his fists tightening. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're just a coward hiding in the woods. If you ever lay a hand on my kid again..." I cut him off. I didn't lay a hand on them. I just gave them a choice: respect other people's work or deal with the consequences. The air was heavy. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the woman hissed through her teeth, "We should call the cops on you." I smiled calmly, though my heart was pounding. "Go ahead. I got everything on video. Every single time they destroyed my cabin. Every laugh. Every broken plank. You want to involve the police?" "I'd love that." Their faces shifted. The man with the belly looked uncertain. The woman's eyes darted to the others. The jawline man clenched his teeth, grinding them audibly. They hadn't expected that. "Listen," I continued, my voice low and steady. "I don't want a war. But if your kids step foot here again, if they so much as scratch this cabin, I will show the footage to the police. And believe me, vandalism charges won't look good on their records." The clearing went quiet. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath. Finally, the parents turned and walked away, muttering under their breath. But I saw it in their eyes, the anger, the humiliation. They weren't done with me. Not yet. The next week was tense. Every sound in the forest made me flinch. Every snapped twig made me wonder if they were back. But nothing happened. My cabin stayed safe. My trap stayed untouched. Until one night. It was around midnight when I heard it, the sound of engines. Not one but several. Headlights flashed between the trees, cutting through the darkness. I stepped outside and my stomach dropped. 3 trucks pulled into the clearing. Doors slammed. And out poured not just the parents, but more men. 6, maybe 7 in total. Flashlights in their hands. Angry voices echoing. They weren't here to talk. "You think you can mess with our kids?" the beer belly man shouted. "You think you can embarrass us in front of the whole damn neighborhood?" I felt my pulse race. This wasn't kids anymore. This wasn't even angry parents. This was escalation. And I was one man standing against a mob. But what they didn't know was that I had been preparing for this too. The forest was mine. And I wasn't going to let them destroy what was mine. "Leave now," I called out, my voice loud and firm. "This is your last warning." They laughed. One of them swung a crowbar in his hand. Another picked up a rock. The beer belly man spat on the ground. "You're finished?" They began to spread out, circling my cabin. But as they took their first steps forward, the ground beneath them betrayed them. Snap. A rope pulled tight, yanking 2 men off their feet as a hidden snare trap dragged them into the air. They dangled from a tree, cursing and shouting. Another 2 stepped forward, and fell straight into a second pit I had dug earlier that week, deeper than the first. Their flashlights clattered to the bottom, beams spinning wildly. Panic rippled through the group. "What the hell is this?" one man screamed. "Get me down," another shouted from above. I stepped into the open, holding the remote for my hidden lights. The clearing burst into brightness, revealing every trap, every line of rope, every pit. "This is my forest," I said, my voice steady. "I built this place with my own hands. And if you think you can come here, destroy it, threaten me, then you'll learn the same lesson your kids did." They were furious. Some tried to fight their way out. But the harder they struggled, the worse it got. Ropes tightening, dirt walls collapsing, fear spreading among them like fire. The beer-belly man glared at me, his face red with rage. "You're insane," he spat. "No," I said quietly. "I'm just tired of bullies thinking they can take whatever they want." By the time the night ended, the men were humiliated, trapped, defeated. Some begged, some cursed. But eventually, one by one, I let them go. Not because I forgave them, but because I wanted them to walk away knowing that I wasn't afraid anymore. When they left, stumbling back to their trucks, I knew one thing: this wasn't over. But neither was I. Because if they wanted a war, they had just declared it. For a few nights after the ambush, the forest was quiet. Too quiet. I repaired my traps, rebuilt the cabin door they had kicked, and tried to rest. But sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept replaying their angry faces, the way they looked at me when they left that night. I knew men like them. They weren't the type to give up. And I was right. 3 days later, I woke to the sound of voices outside my cabin. Not teenagers this time. Not even parents. Police. 2 cruisers were parked at the edge of the clearing, red and blue lights flashing against the trees. 4 officers stood in front of my cabin, hands on their belts. Behind them, at a safe distance, the parents I had humiliated were smirking, arms crossed. The beer-belly man raised his voice, pointing at me. "That's him. That's the lunatic who trapped our kids and attacked us in the woods." One of the officers stepped forward, calm but firm. "Sir, we've had some serious complaints about what's been happening here. We need to talk." My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to stay steady. I'd prepared for this. "Of course," I said, pulling a small hard drive from my bag. "I've been waiting for you." I placed it in the officer's hand. "On that drive you'll find 3 months of security footage. Every act of vandalism. Every broken wall. Every time their kids destroyed my property. And," I looked past him right into the parents' eyes, "every second of what happened 3 nights ago." The officers exchanged looks. The one with the hard jaw plugged the drive into his cruiser's laptop. They huddled around the screen, watching silently. Minute by minute their faces changed. From suspicion, to surprise, to something closer to anger, but not at me. When the footage of the parents storming my cabin and falling into the traps played, one officer let out a sharp laugh before quickly covering it with a cough. Finally, the lead officer turned back to me. "Sir, thank you for cooperating. From what we've seen, you've acted strictly in self-defense. Your property, your right to protect it. You won't be facing charges." Relief flooded through me. But it wasn't over. The officer then turned to the parents. His tone hardened. "Now as for you." The smirks vanished. "You've admitted to trespassing, destruction of property, and attempted assault. And your kids," he looked at the beer-belly man directly, "have been caught on camera committing repeated acts of vandalism." The forest fell silent, except for the buzzing of the cruiser's lights. "You should all consider yourselves very, very lucky," the officer continued, "that he hasn't pressed charges yet." The parents exploded. "This is ridiculous," the woman shouted. "He's making us look like criminals," the jawline man barked. But the officer raised his hand sharply. "Quiet. You've embarrassed yourselves enough. If you cause so much as one more problem for this man, I will personally make sure those charges stick. Do I make myself clear?" Their faces burned with humiliation. They muttered curses under their breath, but none of them dared to argue further. Finally, the cruisers turned around, engines rumbling, leaving the clearing bathed in silence again. I stood there, heart pounding, watching the parents retreat into the distance. For the first time, I felt the weight lift from my chest. I had won. Weeks passed. The kids never came back. The parents never showed their faces again. My cabin stood untouched, peaceful. I finished building the porch I had started months ago. Hung wind chimes by the window. Even planted flowers outside the door. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the trees in gold, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee and breathed deeply. For the first time in a long time, the forest was mine again. And as the wind rustled through the trees, I couldn't help but smile. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply peace.